Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Red Helix Cyber Focus. Today, we're going to be talking about cyber threat intelligence. I'm here with my esteemed colleague, Rob Pocock, our technical director here at Red Helix, and we're joined, I'm very lucky to be joined by our friend from Centripetal, one of the partners of Red Helix, by Chris Handscomb. Chris, welcome to the podcast. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Tom. I'm doing well. Well, as
Excellent.
always. Thank you.
Brilliant. Can you provide us with a little bit of an introduction to yourself?
Of course, yeah. My name is Chris Handscomb. I work with Centripetal as the Director of Solutions for the EMEA region. I'm the technical voice, or my team is the technical voice of the customer, so to speak. I've been in cyber about 5 or 6 years now after a career in software and through tech support. I found my calling, landed on my feet 5 or 6 years ago, and I've been doing that ever since.
Awesome. And whereabouts are you coming to us from today, Chris?
I'm originally from England, but I live now in Ireland. So Centripetal's EMEA base is in Galway, Ireland, and I live a little out to the west of that. Famously, where Sting recorded all of the music for the Police. Tiny little village in the middle of nowhere.
Nice. Very good. Good tidbit there. Rob and I, we're both in Oxfordshire, so I don't know about you, but it's particularly chilly. But we've got a beautiful blue sky outside today.
Fair to say it's not warm here.
So, cyber threat intelligence. Rob and I've picked this topic because I think it's sort of a turning point this year we've seen where lots of people who are practitioners of cybersecurity are really looking for ways to come up against what we've seen as some increasingly sophisticated TTPs from the attack and from the threat landscape. And people are looking for ways to enhance their security stack to make those incremental changes and incremental strengthening of what they're trying to achieve. So, Chris, we spoke earlier on, and you had a bit of a zoomed out view of this. So, it'd be great to hear your perspective on, why this is such an important topic now.
Great question or reminder. I think looking back at the last, I've been in the IT industry for 15 going on 20 years at this stage. A lot has changed in that time. I think anyone who really thinks back will remember how fast the IT industry has changed, how fast tech has changed. We've looked at network monitoring, and now we've found in the last 5 or 6 years in particular a real focus on security monitoring. A lot of people are stuck in a condition where they don't know why that's the case. Why are we even looking at our security? What are we hoping to stop? But in the last 5, 6 years, the world has changed. Technology has changed. I have a big passion for enablement with technology. The more tools we can put in front of people to allow them to work faster, better, cheaper, absolutely great. But as we've done that, we've opened many, many more attack vectors to get to organizations or individuals. And so I would encourage anyone to really think deeply about what has changed in their role or in their business in the last 5 or 6 years. It's something we don't think of. If we imagine month by month, nothing really changes. But if you sit and have a real 30-second view of what has changed in your life and your business and your job, it's probably quite a lot. And so I think that prompts a different thought level needed towards security in particular, from my perspective.
And we've got to be so much more smart with the way that we're pulling our security thinking and security programs together now. I think, just listening to what you're saying there, we're almost at a bit of a leap in the last year as well, on top of everything that's happened, given the AI coming into play. And what stood out to me there was you talking about speed. And I think speed's got to be coupled with accuracy. And I think that's where this conversation really comes into its own, because things are happening so quickly and changing at such a fast pace compared to maybe how things have changed previously. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Rob?
Yeah, it's interesting that security over the years has for a long time, pretty much since security tools existed, they've all been about making as much noise as possible. And we almost saw value in the noisier security tool was, the better it was. It had to be good because it was telling me a million events. And that's kind of caused its own problems along the way as well. So I see threat intel as a way of almost trying to reduce some of the alerts we're seeing. Rather than getting 8 bits of your security stack or screaming at you saying something's gone wrong, it's like, well, just tell me once and tell me as soon as you can. And that's where I see threat intel being quite useful in today's modern security world. And we've got to almost get away from that thought process we have as engineers, thinking, if I put a new machine in, I'm going to get another 1,000 events a second. That's good, and actually when you speak to SOC teams, when you speak to the SOC engineers, that's the opposite of good. That's bad, because they're already busy. They're already, pretty much a tsunami of alerts coming into them. If we can use threat intel platforms to try and reduce that list, still give you security, still make your network secure, but actually give the SOC teams a little bit of a break. I see Chris nodding there, so I think he agrees. Yeah,
absolutely. I would say, as you were saying that, I was thinking, both of you, Tom leading in with AI and Rob expanding on alerting, I was having a thought that if I rewind 10 years ago to when life was very different, if I wanted to attack you in a digital way, say through your web servers, it was quite a hard thing to do. I'd have to know how web servers work. I'd have to know roughly what app language you're using to make your product. I'd have to find a way in based on some skill and some expertise. And so when I broke something, I could have been the very first person that had ever done it. Now with the proliferation of things like ChatGPT, those exploits or those OG break-ins are documented very well on the internet. So you can now go as a cake maker. You don't have to have an IT background. You can open up ChatGPT and I can ask, how do I attack Rob? And that little tool will go and it will do all the research on Rob's business and Rob's platform and Rob's product, and it will tell me everything, and it will correlate it with thousands of intellectuals that have hacked and stacked and written out instructions. And so you can now click a button in a bedroom in the middle of anywhere, poor, rich, isolated, busy, and you can have a complete attack overview. Now, I think with that, because the volume is increasing so widely there, those tools are pulling on known attack types. They're not creating anything new. The chance of you going to ChatGPT and asking it, create a completely new hack vector, very unlikely. And so the event magnitude the event width is absolutely increasing in magnitude, but it's all coming from known attack types. There's very little new coming. It's just that many more people are joining the party. And I think that's a great, subject that prompts deep thought from the both of you there. I would agree that less events is more in the security focus going forwards. Having millions of extra events telling you how many bots are hitting you every day is absolutely rubbish. It's costing you money on SIEM ingest. It's costing you staff time. And the staff, as Rob said, the SOC engineers working through this problem are human beings. They would much rather eating a cheese and cucumber sandwich than trying to correlate a million of this and a million of that, the same thing that happened yesterday and the same thing that will happen tomorrow.
I don't know what SOCs you've been eating, cheese and cucumber sandwiches. As I say, can of Coke and pizza, but yeah,
Chris has obviously got a slightly more healthy diet than you, Rob. I think that's fascinating insight, Chris. I think from listening to you there, there's obviously several different ways in which threat intelligence can be applied in a stack, and I think you touched on the bots scenario there, and actually that's for a SOC, that's almost a win situation, because there's been a known and your tool has alerted you to the fact that it's blocked something. Brilliant, it's blocked it. I think for me that the most scary part, and where threat intelligence can really benefit practitioners, is the things that are going unnoticed, TTPs that are going unnoticed by the sort of standard tools that people would have in their stack. And that's why I think, you know, threat intelligence and having that added to your stack is really important. You know, we've seen so many you know, and we've had significant detriment to British GDP. It's well documented this year from stealthy TTPs, which wouldn't otherwise be detected because they're using new ways of getting around standard defenses. I mean, what are your thoughts? Like, why is threat intelligence going to be important in the coming months and years?
It's a great question, and I agree with your overview of that, especially in relation to the economic detriment that is coming as a result of these large companies being attacked. The stark reality is that if you are a little bakery in the middle of nowhere and your business is turned upside down, that's only really going to have a knock-on effect into the local community of people trying to eat the cakes. If you are a car manufacturer manufacturing 50,000 vehicles a week, selling them all over the world for things like taxis, chauffeurs, what have you, massive impact, not just domestically, but internationally, huge reputational damage. So to your question of the unknowns and what people aren't currently seeing, is it circles back to Rob's larger point there about event volume. The security practitioners at most organizations these days have they're limited in size and they're not often given the biggest budget. So they're often responsible for digital security, network security, as well as compliance, physical security, and so on and so on. So it could be the case that you've got those stock engineers with their pizza and Coke trying to filter through 1 million events per day per engineer. And you've got your security, physical perimeter security people watching all the cars that are coming in and going. This is all being fed up to one human being through a couple of managers. You take away some of those larger problems and you allow focus to go back to the places that matter. If someone's trying to break through the door, but you're so focused on the network, then you're not going to see the physical intrusion. If someone's so focused on the network and you're too focused on the door, same thing. So the fact is that from the data we see, somewhere between 90 and 95% of threats that are harming organizations daily are doing so without their knowledge. Organizations are using limited threat data where available for many reasons. And so somewhere around 90 to 95% of threats that are entering and leaving their network are doing so with no visibility by the team monitoring that network, even in the case where they are overwhelmed by substantial log volume.
Yeah, that makes sense, Chris, because it's like the way I look at it is, you know, threat intel platforms isn't going to be the one security tool that's going to save you. You still got to have a security stack. Where I think threat intel platforms really come to their own is to get rid of that noise. Yeah, get rid of the, I don't want to use the word dross, but the known knowns. You know, when you look at any breach from the last probably 6 years, going back even further, once you've done the root cause analysis, once you know that the dust has settled and you look at what happened before the event was known to me, you know, how did they get into my network? What was their first attack vector? It's all pretty known stuff. And it's not all 0-day attacks. You know, it's known things which either we're ignoring, or because we don't see them because our security stack's not capable, or that we're just overloaded with noise. We don't see the underlying issue. We almost denial of service attack ourselves with events, and the important event gets through because we lose it in the sea of, or the tsunami of events coming in. And I think that's kind of where we want to get to, Tom, is actually if we can get rid of the known and the simple stuff, then the rest of our security stack can actually concentrate on the complicated, detailed, targeted stuff.
And I think it's, you know, a real outcome that comes from that is that prioritization. You know, all of those alerts, all of that noise, all of those logs, whatever it is that any particular tool is ingesting and trying to make sense of, it's just going to be enriched by threat intelligence. So I think we've talked sort of and covered like why it's important and what's changed in the market that's increasing the pace at which something like threat intelligence and having that in your stack is going to accelerate your ability to defend, and provide a proactive approach to defense as well, which I think is really important, because we talked about that on our previous podcast about how we've got to have, or practitioners have got to have, a proactive element built into their defense. It's got to be continually being considered how they're keeping up to date with the latest threats.
Tom,
So we've talked about. Sorry, go on.
That's an amazing point that I just had to add to. As a society, we're actually pretty proactive. You wouldn't let someone walk through your driveway, open your door, go up your stairs, lay in your bed and eat your snacks, would you? We have been doing that for a long time in IT security. In fact, what we don't want is cameras guarding the driveway so that we can later report what has happened. We just want to keep our eyes open, see something coming and say, no, thanks. You're not coming in here today. I agree with that.
And I come from a military background, Chris. We've explained that on the podcast before. And, I came at it as you've got to constantly be proactive to adapt to how your adversary is adapting, which leads perfectly into threat intelligence. And actually in the military, we've got whole divisions of people that are solely focused in, when we're making our plans, what's the enemy doing? What's changed? How do we need to combat that? How do we need to change our equipment or our TTPs to be able to mitigate against certain risks and things? So we've talked about sort of why it's important, but let's just delve into, what actually is this? There'll be people that would have done their, ISACA qualifications or ISC2 qualifications, and they'll be thinking, yeah, I read this in a textbook and I answered it in the exam, but I don't really know what it is. Like, what tangible thing is this threat intelligence and where it comes from?
Yeah, that's a good question. So threat intelligence, you could think of it in the most simple way. We could say that it's records created to indicate something as known bad. So primarily, we would call these IOCs, indicators of compromise. There's a red flag that we would put against an IP address or a domain name as a third-party way of saying and agreeing as a community, this resource has either acted poorly before, might act poorly in the future, or is perfectly clean right now. So it'd be the very same way that it works against a number plate. If you're caught speeding, police pull you over next time. They say, hey, you've got a history of speeding. Just want to make sure that you're not doing that this time because it looks like you were going a little fast. Threat intelligence would be, broadly speaking, much of the same. Now, of course, it can progress outwards to more company specific or more individual specific threat intelligence. And there's a number of data points that we can take, like IDS signatures and manual dark web research that will be thrown in. So if your brand is impersonated or someone is trying to hijack it, there's everything from mass records all the way down to individual specifics. And why we've started to build that collection at Centripetal as well as an industry is because we were tired, I suppose, of wasting time chasing the same threats over and over again. Now we can predict en masse when an attack is likely to happen based on whether it's happened before or whether it's currently happening. And that's sort of a short summary of what threat intelligence might be useful for.
And so you're sucking in all of these data points and then correlating them, bringing them all together to draw conclusions between the. Is that correct?
Yeah. So from Centripetal's perspective, as a managed security services provider, what I would know and see on a daily basis and the kind of role that my team would be involved in is exactly that. It's taking all of that threat intelligence data that is available and comparing what we're seeing across multiple sources and then applying that to an organization. So two individual threat data providers might have completely opposing answers. If we cook up an example here on the fly, it might be the case that a company such as yourselves works with threatening words, threatening type deployments all day. You're a security provider. So it might not be wise to simply filter everything we see relating to security. So one threat vendor might have that policy and another might have a slightly differing one. We need to compare all of the information that's out there and bring the right answer to you. If you're making a piece of malware as your job so that you can test your own antivirus product, you definitely don't want a piece of threat intelligence classifying you as malware to stop you from doing your work. So it's about taking all of that information and also finding contextually the most correct information for you at that time.
I think that's important to say that there are multiple threat feeds. There's open source ones, there's government ones, there's other vendors ones, and they're all creating their own threat feeds. So I guess, again, if we're not careful, we hit ourselves with the same problem again, that if we consume all these threat feeds, we're then going to get a million events again from a million different threat free tools, if I can say it. So that deduplication, that awareness of the industry, the time of day, everything needs to be taken into account, and know what your business is doing, as well as what the attackers are doing. Is that right, Chris?
That's absolutely right. The way I see it is that there are three key issues to companies who wish to explore the implementation of threat intelligence. One is the money. Step one is the cost. It's extremely expensive the more threat intelligence you start subscribing to, beyond the how and why, beyond the why me. Two is if you have gone and bought all of that threat intelligence, you then have that issue of conflicting providers, conflicting answers. By step three, you've ended up with, congratulations, you've convinced the board to give you money for unlimited threat intel, and you've also tried to compare and collate it. Is even if you arrive at that point, problem three is, where do you put all that information? Where do you start storing such massive volumes of data that are truly huge, bigger than 100 people could process on a daily basis? What equipment do you put that into? You can't just search on Google, I need a solution, or ask ChatGPT, I need a solution that will process 100 billion indicators of compromise. It doesn't exist. So it's a three-step problem, really, that each piece solves only when combined.
And so if you tick all of those boxes and you've got somewhere to store your threat intelligence, you've recognized that that you can afford it, you've recognized that it's something that you can balance as a control against a particular risk to provide the right level of ROI in your security stack. My next question, as a practitioner, I'm thinking, okay, how do I design it into my system? Where do I want to put it? What are the different benefits from putting it in different places?
Great question. If you have, it doesn't matter what type of network or operation you're running. If you have access to that much data and the ability to take enforcement action against it, you want to sit it at the edge of the network. You want to sit it at all ingress egress points across your estate, whether that is individual users or remote offices in your cloud environments, in your physical HQ. You want to sit a solution that can do that enforcement in front of everything else. The reason why is it would be sort of senseless not to. You've already implemented existing security controls. Most organizations will have a firewall or next-gen firewall with a threat feed, a subscription. Some organizations will then have things like IDS systems, IPS systems. There will be SIEM with SOAR capability so that anything monitored can detect, respond, block. If you really can get a hold of all of that threat data, aggregate it in a way that makes sense for you, and process it, the logical place is to put it at the edge. That will stop everything getting in the first place. And on the way out, every one of your existing security tools has to have been bypassed for that threat to have been detected by the solution at that point, which means it will give you a comprehensive review of how effective your current security solutions are.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, Chris, because when I speak to many security vendors, and they all talk about threat intel. They all consume either their own or a third-party threat intel. But I guess depending who they are, if they're an EDR, an NDR, firewall, an IDS, IPS vendor, they all consume some kind of threat intel. or you can subscribe to some kind of threat intel. But depending where they are in the stack, depends on how far it gets into your network before it's detected, before it's remediated. Is that what you're saying? So if you can do that as close to your entry point as possible, it just gives your other tools a little bit of breathing space.
It absolutely will allow your existing tools to focus on what they are designed for. A firewall is not a security appliance in that proactive monitoring type sense. It's designed for allow Rob in because he's allowed to be in, but don't allow Tom in because it's a Wednesday and the wind is blowing from the east. That's what a firewall is really designed for. And on the exit from the network as well, having a tool that will catch everything. Everything that's traversing outbound is going to be really bad if it's caught by us. It's going to be command and control server hits. It's going to be, data uploads to known bad sources. And so I would say yes to that. And in fact, many organizations have added more and more and more tools. But those tools then have their own vulnerabilities or weaknesses associated with them. We see time and time again that firewalls have succumbed to exploit because they have been the primary gateway into a network, or they've been the primary protection wall of a network. So we've seen, in particular in the last year, remote user injection exploits. What this means is we can take your firewall, once we know the address, and simply command it to let us in. Knock, knock, I'm coming in now. In simple terms, we can send a request to that firewall using a specific syntax and say, create me an admin user, please, and it will respond in the affirmative through its management port. Now, that's not, of course, all firewalls, but these vulnerabilities have come up in several major brands over the last year. So the very thing that is employed to protect the network is a weak point and cannot protect itself. So it should be relegated back down to doing its actual job, which is sort of conditional access and range access, depending on the time of day and so forth. And a protective bubble should be put around everything that you have already, something that is not vulnerable itself, something that holds all of your other security tools to account. And you will find that through event reduction or through CPU reduction, what that will do, to our earlier point about spotting the really unknown threats, is if everything goes quiet, you will notice, for example, a nation state attack more easily, because you will notice a CPU spike somewhere that it isn't. And if you look at all of these giant breaches over the last 6-12 months, in particular in the UK, almost none of them have been nation state level experts operating out of dark rooms and attacking. A majority of them have been ChatGPT wielding basement dwellers beginning a process, and of course involving more as they've gone forward. So I'd say get everything quiet and get the events reduced, get CPU and memory stable across the board, and then you'll have eyes to see, okay, this system here is spiking, that shouldn't be happening.
I think that was an excellent wrap up. I love your analogy of basement dwellers. I think that's brilliant. If it's such a bizarre adversary landscape that we find ourselves in, it's who these people are and what their motivations are, and the colossal challenge they're causing businesses, across the globe. Yeah. I think we've had a brilliant discussion. We've gone through right from the beginning of threat intelligence all through how the mechanics of right from the beginning of the threat landscape right through the mechanics of threat intelligence. Has been really insightful, especially to get your knowledge and pick your brains on actually how it works and how we can actually implement it in our stack, Chris. We'd like to finish with a few, like, what stood out for you from our discussion. So Chris, I will let you have the last word. So I'm going to go to Rob. Rob, so we've been talking about threat intelligence. This podcast is to help our audience understand what cyber threat intelligence is, how it impacts them, why it's important right now. What stood out for you from our conversation?
I think what stands out for me is probably two things. If I'm allowed two things, yeah. So threat intel, as we said earlier, the width of attack these days is massive, from nation state to school kids, coming home from school thinking I'm going to go onto ChatGPT and do some hacking. And all that's doing is pushing the event count up ridiculously high. And we know the SOC teams are struggling to keep up. I can't remember the last time I spoke to a SOC engineer who isn't overworked and absolutely knackered, and they would be the first to admit that that's not the best state to be in to try and to detect all these events. So anything I can put in my network, in my security stack, which is actually going to not silence the SOC, but turn the noise level down a little bit, give me time to breathe, and give me time to actually do the job I really want to do as a security engineer, the complex, the fun, the interesting stuff, not just, oh yeah, it's another botnet attack from a thousand devices out there, which we know are always doing this. We know they're botnets, and yet they've come all the way through my network before they get blocked. That's what stood out to me, I think.
And I think, similar to your point, what I loved about your analogy of the network, Chris, and your explanation of when we're talking about where threat intelligence is best placed, I think looking at the traffic that's coming in, obviously super important, going back to, an analogy you were saying about someone walking into your house or whatever. But I think there's so much extra added value of saying, okay, well, what's talking out and what's being said? Because, hey, you might have released an update to your threat intelligence tool to say, hey, there's something new that we found. You might not have caught it on the way in, but you'll catch it on the way out, because it might be trying to, something might be trying to speak to the control server or whatever it is. I think that adds so much value, and thinking about how you can utilize that train of thought when designing a security stack is really powerful. And so to you, Chris, your final thoughts on our discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on your point there, I think in somewhere between 90 and 100% of zero-day attacks that we've seen over the last, the 3 years that I've been in this role at Centripetal in particular, none of the attacks that I laid my own eyes on didn't have something known. And in fact, with some of the attacks that we saw, some of the medium and larger sized ones, 3, 4, 5 months before the 0-day was published, before the POC for the exploit was published and the community acknowledged its existence, we saw network sniffing. We saw people being in and around networks. We were able to stop it using known bad indicators. And to that point that you made on exit traffic and what's going out, command and control, things like that, they operate silently by design. The attackers, Tom, with your military background, this strategy will probably resonate with you. They lie in wait until they're ready to act. They don't give the game away until they're ready to push the button. And by that moment, it's too late. Unless you've taken some proactive action, they're there and you cut them off. Then they simply move on to the next target. My biggest takeaway from this chat that we're having, as I'm reminded of it, is that people are doing a good job. If anyone's listening, you are doing a good job. The landscape has just become messy. And it's not your fault that you can't keep up with 7,000 teenagers with ChatGPT. None of us can. We all remember being them when we had an abacus to play with. It was far more fun. And so my takeaway is, as everything increases, it's going to increase. Don't be scared, but be wise. Reach out, put some extra controls in place, look at what else is available in the market, explore what you're not currently doing. Don't quake in your boots just because the news is blowing up every day that another major corporation is being hit. That may not be you, but it certainly won't be you if you can take a few proactive steps to lock things down.
That's great, Chris. I love that. People are doing a great job. I feel like we're under a tidal wave of speed and change that just humans are, for the best will in the world, we need things that are augmented by, intelligent processes, intelligent information rather than just data, threat intelligence being one of those tools to support us in being able to do our job now, because things have changed so quickly.
Right.
it's been really brilliant having you to chat to and to draw on your intelligence. You'll have and the audience will have noticed I've been the one asking the questions because, you know, this is not my area of expertise. So it's excellent to be able to have you. Thank you for joining us. And I've got one last question. What's your message to the audience? And this was a blindside, so think about it.
That's okay. That's an amazing question. Luckily, I've been blindsided on occasion from time to time, Tom. My message to the audience is, as I said a minute or two ago, it's that you're doing a great job. You know, things are spiraling out of control as it seems, but keep doing what you're doing. Focus on what you know and love, what you do for a job. And from a security perspective, be a bit more proactive. It's not a shame. You haven't done a bad job. In no case, when customers call Centripetal, in no case do we come along and say your existing controls are rubbish. In fact, in almost every case where I speak to customers in the field, I say you've done an amazing job. This is military grade. This is amazing. You are really crushing it. And when we find super impactful stuff, which is often much easier because of that work that they've done, we're not insulting the great work that they've done. We're saying, what you've done is amazing. Here's the next step. We'll give you a hand. And so I would say for people listening, if you have any fear about security, balance it proactively, you know, admit that you've done a good job and seek out a few new options, explore a little bit more. And for the love of the Lord, don't be tempted into the ChatGPT hacking.
And on that note, gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been brilliant to chat to both of you. Chris, I'm sure we'll be having more discussions, and I'm sure we'll invite you back on the podcast at a later date, probably to talk about how the threat landscape's changed again and how it's even more important to have threat intelligence augment your stack. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Take care. And if you've been listening to the podcast and you've not been looking at our wonderful faces, then thank you for listening. And if you've got this far, we hope that you have enjoyed our insights into cyber threat intelligence, and we'll look forward to being able to support you in future podcasts by providing more insight into different elements of cybersecurity. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Tom.
Thank you.
Great.
Cheers, Chris.